You guys thought we were tinfoil hatting it for the last video about watching the day before.
Oh, no.
You ain't seen shiz. If you want to have the true sort of tinfoil hattedness, there isn't no better tinfoil hatted content than game theories. And seeing as you all liked my theorying and our theorying about the last Five Nights at Freddy's video, we're gonna go even deeper. This is just a theory. A game theory. And today, what's going on, internet? Today we're gonna be learning about Five Nights at Freddy's. How big is Freddy's dick? We're gonna find out by pulling out a meter ruler. No, I'm joking. Let's watch the video. If you didn't see the first...
internet. Well,
oh god, I thought that was.
Oh Jesus Christ! It really is just like that.
It is. What's going on,
internet? Watch the game theory video. It's so long. It's not.
That is one of my party pieces, being able to sound like Matt Pat. So if you didn't watch the first video, we've already watched part 1. There'll be a link to that in the comments below. But, you know, this is for us to have a little bit of a look-see and see where does this all come from.
Welcome to Game Theory, and officially page 7 of the FNAF timeline script. Last time we covered the origins of Freddy's. We talked about William Afton's childhood dream project of making a singing bear come to life, and the infuriating moment that his dream is copied by a rival restaurant franchise looking to steal away his success. The merger of the two franchises results in William meeting Henry, a brilliant designer with a knack for robotics. Working together, they make Fredbear's flourish, spawning popular Saturday morning cartoon shows, toy lines, and spin-off restaurants under the
I don't know. It kind of feels like when we watched.
Afton was thriving.
Oh God, what was the shooter that we watched?
Good question. I don't remember. Clearly, very memorable.
It was horrifying. We were not stoned enough to watch that video.
Oh, you mean the Maxwell video, the Cruelty Squad?
Yeah, the Maxwell.
You don't mean stoned. You mean acid tripped.
To life. Bringing things to life, yeah, that was his core driving force.
Creationism.
And it was this very passion that would mutate, twist, and morph from here on out in the story. Because with life, there is inevitably death.
See, in my eyes, I legitimately don't think the purple guy was necessarily even a bad guy originally. Like, him wanting to create things, he had authentic intent of making stuff. It's just as power does, power corrupts. As power corrupts, as power is absolute, power corrupts absolutely. Whatever that saying is. Oh no,
you were almost
power
there.
Is absolute.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what I was after.
Something that Afton would become intimately familiar with. But before Afton acquaints himself with death, I want you to take some time to acquaint yourself with our newest channel. Guys, this is a huge moment for us theorists. For the last decade, we've had this 4-player controller.
The only one I actually care about is food theories.
In the final missing piece. Get ready for the rollout of our newest theorist channel. Drum roll, please. Style theory.
Shut up! Shut the fuck
up!
No! Matt,
Of all, are you serious? Why? Why style theory? I get it, but there's other subjects you could have gone to, like inky theory. Me, make a theory about me. Make an entire channel dedicated to me. I am a conundrum. I am a mystical thing. You could have had way more substance. Why style of all things? How does that have any relativity to everything? Like food, I get it. Gaming, I get it. But style? Why? You know what? Let's
We're looking at the science, math, psychology, history, and mystery of the way you look, your clothing, fashion trends, hygiene, and makeup. Now, I know that theorizing about style might sound weird at first, but hear me out. I grew up not understanding style or fashion at all. Admittedly, I was a bit of a hot mess, blissfully ignorant to the impact that style has over your life and how the world treats you. But over time, by educating myself on the ins and outs of the fashion industry, I was better able to achieve my true self and find my own sense of personal style. And that right there,
I will say though, Matt Pat's adorable.
The way that you look directly affects the way
he and his partner are great.
He is literally one of the most wholesome
understanding those rules and being able to take some control over all of that is incredibly valuable. It's an educational curve. And what do we do on these channels? We like to educate you while entertaining you, which honestly is why I think this channel is so important for us to launch. There are so many lies and half-truths in the fashion industry that there needs to be someone out there to say, hey, this is right, this is wrong, and this is what science says. Also, you know, we're gonna have a lot of fun because talking about fashion is weird. This channel has already given me the excuse to bludgeon a ballistic head to death using a high heel.
Oh, this reminds me of a thing.
This is why you reject skeletons and embrace goo.
No.
You don't want your skull filled with blue sludge? Fill it with pink and yellow sludge instead.
I literally saw a YouTube short earlier about a specific fashion thing, which was self-defense high heels that were introduced in Italy.
Yes, I saw this as well.
Post First World War.
I mean,
wow,
are we literally proving ourselves wrong? Like having weapons hidden behind clothing, dude. I guarantee you they're gonna do one about the hidden blades from Assassin's Creed.
Almost assuredly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
it's also the channel where we're gonna physically be testing the viability.
This was fake. Boob armor never existed. For 2 reasons.
Yeah.
1, it wasn't efficient, and 2, women generally didn't have to wear armor, so they never made armor tailored for women. Generally speaking, this was something that was a modern iteration. And yes, it's kind of sexy. Yes, it's kind of cool. Yes, it's kind of fancy. But there are maybe only a handful of examples of armor in all of history that were made for women.
Okay, but didn't Shadiversity cover a thing like this already? And it's like, look, the logic is there. Like, if you had a matriarchal society instead of a patriarchal society, wouldn't you want to make boob armor rather than giant fuck-off cod pieces?
Exactly.
Like, the psychology is there. Whether it didn't necessarily exist, but it makes sense
or how
that
many
it
t-shirts
could.
it takes to stop a bullet. There's also practical everyday stuff too on this channel. Do
anyway,
school
we're spending too long about
actually
this. Let's
benefit
get
the
to the
students? Does it
FNAF
make
stuff.
a huge
FNAF. Give me
theory
FNAF.
marathon?
Oh my god,
Give me
I forgot
FNAF.
this wasn't even the fucking point of this video.
Here we go.
Fredbear's Family Diner and the newly
Yes, so we
opened
remember
Freddy
this. There were 2
Fazbear's
diners
Pizza.
originally.
Together, William and Henry had been able to take the hybrid
Yes,
suit idea
I
and
remember
make
this.
it
I
into a
remember this.
reality. They called their new invention the
I love the art
Springlock
style.
suit.
They have some
And fittingly
great
enough, it was
artists working on
symbolic
this.
of the partnership between these 2 men. A human suit as designed by William that could become a freestanding Henry-style robot. But because it was still new tech with kinks to work
guys,
out,
when
the
am I gonna
rollout
get my
was limited, restricted
cosplay?
only to the
Somebody
Fredbear's
wanna make
Family
me a,
Diner location. All of this meant that William was busier than ever. He didn't have time to be a full-time parent, so he designed a nanny cam system where cameras and speakers were hidden throughout the neighborhood,
so this
as
would be
well
why
as
there's
in his
cameras
youngest
all over the
son's favorite
place.
toy, Psychic Friend Fredbear.
I
mean, plushie.
That actually makes a lot of sense,
Oh.
right? Because you think about it logically. You go back to like Five Nights at Freddy's 1, 2, and whatever. No diner would ever have that many security cameras, but that makes sense.
Cameras just weren't enough to raise a kid. He also left childcare duties to his eldest son, Michael.
Yeah,
there was
and we
just
saw
one
how well
problem
that
with that.
went.
Michael was far from the best babysitter. He tormented his younger
Sadistic
brother by jump scaring
motherfucker.
him with a foxy mask and constantly left him behind. William watched all of it from his cameras. Kids would be kids. Tomorrow was another day, after all. Except Michael's torment didn't stop. Bitter, angry thoughts would run through Michael's mind. Why did he have to be the one to take care of this whining crybaby all the time? It just
Sociopath.
wasn't fair. It was time that he got even with his brother by playing the ultimate prank.
That's
What
an
do you
eldest
mean,
sibling.
even? Your brother did nothing to you, you psychopath. Good lord.
As an eldest sibling, I kind of get it, though.
Yeah.
As fucked up as that is.
Yeah, like the oldest is usually always the one who has the most jaded cynicism, just because I mean, this goes into psychotherapy and familial traits and everything, because obviously the oldest kid is always going to be the first because it's like the test run. And then when the new kid comes along, it's time to take everything you learned from the older kid. The older kid is now old enough to look after themselves. So put all the effort and care into the new kid. Oh boy, don't we love familial traits? And we're not going to get into this because this might get a bit too deep even for my
I
liking.
was going to
Just so
say,
happened to
stop
be on
fucking
this crying
describing me.
child's birthday. He and his friends would take his scared little brother and make him do the one thing that he was terrified of doing, getting close to the animatronics. That would be embarrassing for the kid that was such an embarrassment to him. His brother squirmed, screamed, kicked, and fought, but just as they
And
were putting
this
that
is how
small,
you
squirming
cause
boy up to
trauma.
Fredbear's lips, the mouth snapped shut. The sensitive
that the bite
spring
of
locks inside
A7?
the body had been triggered by the
Not
boy's
stinky.
That is the
Shut
bite
up,
of
Marion.
87.
immediately clamped down. The wriggling stopped. The boy went limp, but it was just a prank. It was meant
It was
to be
just a
funny.
social
The boy was taken to the
experiment,
hospital
dude.
and was immediately given an IV.
Child
Flowers
murder
and
was just a
pills filled
social
the nightstand
experiment.
next to his hospital bed, but the damage was too severe. He couldn't recover. As the younger brother's consciousness began to fade, he could hear Michael's last words, a small and flimsy apology. But his father, Williams, through the voice of the Fredbear plush, were a firm and committed promise to a dying son. You're broken. I will put you back together. This would not be the end. No matter what, William's son would live again.
See, this
it would
is
just take time.
this
Time that
this right here is what this substance and this like unifying content was what was missing a lot in the early days. And this is the kind of stuff that if you only play the games, you will never truly understand the core of the core concept of Five Nights at Freddy's. It's this audiobook style telling of the narrative is what would help anyone who can't put the strings together understand the why and what is happening in this unit. And that's why I love MatPat's theories on things. yes, they are theories. They're not actual based and true, but it's probably the closest thing. If you had to trust somebody to get across the most possible of what is likely to be true, then, you know, MatPat's theories are usually pretty on point, usually.
Right now, he just didn't have.
Also,
his young son's heart flatlined.
Very prominent
The boy
manner.
faded into the inky unknown.
She said my name!
In the
They said
aftermath
my
of the
name!
tragedy, changes started happening around the restaurant.
I'm officially
Kids
canon
were
in
now
the Five
required
Nights
to
at
wear
Freddy's
security
universe!
wristbands
Let's
to prevent
go!
anyone from getting outside without parental permission. Any kid who approached the exit without permission would have to answer to the security puppet, a marionette on strings that could fly around on rails across the restaurant to stop kids in their tracks.
Sound
It was
legal.
William's idea, inspired by Michael constantly leaving the restaurant without his brother. In the wake of Fredbear's spring lock failure, all the hybrid suits were getting retired, locked away at the nearby Freddy Fazbear location. It was yet another tough pill to swallow after all the hard work that he and Henry had put into them. William would eventually bury the boy's small body in a remote location out in the woods right alongside his drive into and out of work every day. The death of this little boy sent the family spiraling. His wife, crippled with grief, was so distraught that all she could do was sit and watch TV. But his son Michael was far worse, complaining of seeing hallucinations.
Do we think Scott Cawthon actually knows the totality of his lore? Because he must do, right? Or at least he must understand what... Because obviously he's retconned a lot over the years. Like, nothing is... It's not as cyclical as it should be. And he has retcon stuff. But do we think do we think Scott Cawthon actually knows his lore? Even if... he's obviously the one who wrote it, but... But do you think he actually knows it? Do you think he has an understanding of his own lore? I don't think he does. I think at this point he's kind of just going on a whim.
The golden
That
bear
he's just making stuff up as he goes along. Because like the original FNAF game, Five Nights at Freddy's 1 definitely was just a game. There was little to no lore to that. I think it was only at like Five Nights at Freddy's maybe 3 where he really started getting a bit more conspiracy theory and deep with how things were being told. Because Five Nights at Freddy's 2, it was kind of more of a playoff of the first, but the ethos and the methodology of how he was telling the story shifted dramatically for 3. And I think 3 is when he realized that he could make this much more interesting and relatable by making this like mysterious concept going around it, this whole string theory of ideas and subplots and subtext. I think it was at 3 that's where it kicked in.
That he was convinced that he was being haunted by the ghost of his brother stuck inside the suit.
I've never
that took
played
his
a Five
life.
Nights at Freddy's, so I don't know.
Feet digging into the wet earth. The words "It's me" ringing.
I've watched a bunch of
Michael's
people play it, but I've never
ears.
played it
Some nights,
myself.
Michael would even go so far as to break out of his room to check the gravesite and ensure that his brother was still there. As for William himself, he disappeared into his work and his drinks. Junior's, the local bar, wasn't far from his son's gravesite. He found himself going there more and more frequently, spending longer and longer amounts of time there. The bar gave him a place to
where
think,
people see
to
a
remember,
scary
to
jump scare
reflect
game.
and stew on
People
how
who look
Henry
under
had
the
stolen
surface
his
see
idea for an animal-themed restaurant. How
psychological
they
trauma.
cut his character out of the cartoon
Horrendous
when
horror
everyone
theory.
else was there. How Henry had
a story
humiliated him
deep
by
enough to
buying him
lose
out of
yourself in.
bankruptcy. And
Almost
now,
as deep
now
as
there
my
was a
butt.
son. Henry had
Hi, how
taken
you
his
doing?
son from him. The robotic part was the part that failed after all. William ordered one more drink, but it was one too many. The bar turned him out and told him to go home. But William didn't go home. Drunk and angry, William raced back to the restaurant to give Henry a piece of his mind, only to find someone else waiting. Henry's daughter,
Please ignore my
Charlie,
thighs.
locked outside of the building.
Don't worry about
bullies
me.
laughing at her through the window. Fine, some other problem
Twitch are
to
being,
fix. But then
cretins
Afton
again.
got
Aren't
an
you,
idea.
chat?
A beautifully awful idea. This was his chance to get back at the man that had humiliated him all those years ago. Henry had killed his business, and now Henry's robotic suit had killed his son. It was time for William to do some killing of his own.
If you would have shown me this art right here, I would have said that's a cool VTuber design.
To be fair, they are
William to
yummy.
do some killing of his own. Let Henry feel what it's like to have something you love get ripped away. While parties continued inside
Something
the
I
walls
love
of
get
the
ripped
pizzeria,
away?
William
That's
attacked
something that
Charlie
my
in the back
subscribers
alley.
know.
He
Every
felt
time the
good. He
monthly
felt free.
resubscription
Years
comes
of
around,
resentment
do
and
I
bitterness
spend
trapped in his heart
$4.99 on a
finally
sub to
released in a
Makari?
moment of pure
Or do I
unapologetic
afford food
evil.
this
He
month?
would make Henry hurt
Obviously,
like
my
he
emotes are
hurts.
important.
And in that moment, William became a killer.
I get it, guys. Your sacrifice of your food and a full belly.
Problems later that night.
Totally a good sacrifice for the sake of emotes, right?
He had just done. Charlie's death would remain on the books as a random act of violence. And though Henry had suspicions about William, there was no physical evidence. Nothing that could link him back to the crime.
He just up
in the weeks
murders?
that followed, Fredbear's family diner would close for good.
His business
partner's
daughter.
That's a bit of an escalation, don't you think? He went from just a slightly angry person that had a kid die from negligence to, you know what, I'm gonna murder a child. I'm just a straight up murder a child. That's
alcohol be like that though.
Oh, you know what? I don't have a kid of my own, so yeah.
Owners in such a
an
short
angry
period
drunk.
of time
Sorry.
was just too much bad press to handle. Besides, Freddy Fazbear's was still open, and it was the newer restaurant anyway. All the equipment from the diner, including the old yellow suits and security puppet, would get retired to that location, and there they would sit for 2 uneventful years. The rest of 1983 and 1984 were spent quietly grieving. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the new cast of characters were hits.
So not
Tragic
87.
memories of their yellow predecessors quickly faded. Afton kept a low profile and buried himself in work and research, quickly reaching Henry's level of engineering and even surpassing him. And while Henry slowed down to grieve, Afton kept going, even starting his own company, Afton Robotics, for all those pet projects that were a little bit too experimental for the regular operations of the pizzeria. The first of these experimental projects was a secret workshop under his house, a veritable bunker, which allowed him to work while still monitoring his kids via hidden security cameras.
My eyes!
1983. A passcode that served as a constant reminder of why the cameras were so important, why he was down there in the first place. This was all to fulfill the promise that he had made to his son, right? I will put you back together. This was for him, all for him,
That's
right?
a lot of string
But cameras
theory
weren't
going on
enough. He needed to solve the runaway Michael
So
problem.
this, okay,
He
so
had to-
I was always wondering, I don't know if this was ever confirmed, but Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was always conceptualized as like, you're not, it was the first Five Nights at Freddy's where you weren't in a restaurant, and there was this big idea that the nightmare animatronics kind of represented the fact that this was in a kid's mind. So I almost feel like Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was based in the head of the kid that got bitten. I think that's like a big leading theory, right? Or was there ever confirmation on that or not? Like Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is very different to everything else.
I mean, I remember watching a couple of different people play it at this stage, though. My thoughts are shifting. Maybe it's the elder son, and it's like his trauma and his fucking memories of getting his younger brother killed.
Yeah, the one that did the bullying to begin with. That would make sense. Like it's either a dream or a trauma response of like knowing the weight of what you've done, kind of done. I can see that being a thing, because I always find it weird how Five Nights at Freddy's 4 was so different. It was very much more of a nightmare-esque thing, and it makes sense with the theming.
Keep him in the house. He couldn't have another one of his kids wind up dead inside of an animatronic suit. So why not run a little experiment on Michael? You see, all this work with Henry had gotten Afton to start learning more about life, robots, the human mind, and what a fallible machine we as humans were. Our reality is so easy to manipulate with a few sensory
comes along.
Deceptions like sound. With just a few sounds, he had discovered that he could alter a person's vision. He could transform blank, smooth plastic robots into lumbering, twisted nightmares.
So
Nightmares far scarier than he could create with actual materials.
Oh my
they would
God.
appear organic, rotting, putrid, terrifying. These would be his means of keeping his son Michael in the house where he belonged. Was it extreme? Maybe. But then again, this was the boy who had killed his son. He would make him sorry. And so Michael would grow up not only dealing with the memories of his own guilt, the hospital room, the pills, the flowers, the death of his brother, but also facing literal nightmares, illusions created by sound. Michael would never forget these either.
That's
Years
horrifying.
later, as a security guard, he would still draw pictures of them inside of his logbook. But all of these extra projects meant that his home life suffered
that suddenly makes a
even
lot more sense.
He was an absent father and
Oh
a
my
non-existent
God.
husband, leaving his wife cold
So yeah,
and alone.
I'm right. It is.
Yeah.
You hide inside your walls when there is music in my halls. All
That actually just sent a shiver up my spine.
Yeah, I don't like
I
that.
see is an empty room.
So it's just his dad tormenting him? Yeah.
An empty
What a fucked up family.
And despite her repeated demands that he leave his office and engage with the family, he refused time and time again.
Get out of your room, honey! You can only watch VTubers for 4 hours a day! You've been in there for 2 weeks!
Cringe.
But no, honey, I'm too busy tier 3 subbing to Iron Mouse. Go away.
And leaving her no choice but to leave.
You burned down my house?
You call that a house? It was like a morgue in there. You need to see your son.
The baby isn't mine.
Well, how's this? I'm keeping the diamond ring.
And through it all, there was one lingering feeling. William wasn't done. He had gotten a taste of what it felt like to be unleashed, what it felt like to be free. Charlie's murder had unlocked something in him, and
Inhibitors
he wanted more.
unleashed.
June 26th, 1985. Putting on the golden Bonnie suit, he lured children one
When you
by
no
one
longer
to the
are
back
restrained
room of the
by
pizzeria
empathy,
when
you're
no one
free
was
to do
looking.
anything.
At first, he was cautious. He would lure them with promises of cake and cookies. He told them that their dog had died. He would ask for help with homework. Susie was the first. You never truly forget your first.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
But where to hide the bodies? He couldn't sneak out. Someone would see him. He had to hide them in a place where they'd never be.
I keep forgetting how dark this game is. I keep forgetting it's predicated off of child murder and death and... Oh...
That one hit really hard, didn't it?
It did. I've been following... That was evil!
Be found.
That
and
was
where
funny.
they'd never leave the
Shut
building.
up, Tia.
It had to be stuffed. Stuffed.
If you
inside
jump scared,
of the
comment down
suits.
below.
No one maintained those things anyway except for him. And so
See?
Susie
This is
would
immersive
go into
reactionary
Chica.
content.
Fritz, Jeremy, and Gabriel would come next, but it was easy.
I mean, I
It
love
was
this, like,
too easy.
fantastical
And with
release
each little
of
life he snuffed out, his lies
having
got
the
bigger.
bodies
Their house
stuffed
was
inside the
burning. They're
animatronics
just
and the
being
souls
kidnapped.
leaking into
Until the
them.
last
That's
one
such a
where
cool
all
concept.
pretense was off. He
Not
let
like I
himself
have a
get
thing
violent.
for,
Too violent.
I'll just
inhabiting
after
and-
school,
and,
throw a bag over his head, hit him with a shovel, and drag him into the back of
Not
my
like I love this
car.
The body of
concept
Cassidy was
of,
far more bloody and broken than any of the
possession and
others.
stuff.
He'd let himself go too far. That
I'm
one,
deeply
that one
interested
he
in
should have
fantastical
killed.
elements
With no
like
more
this.
active animatronics left, he shoved the body into the one suit that remained backstage. The long-forgotten yellow Fredbear, now broken and discolored with age. Broken, like Cassidy was broken, like his son was broken. Newspapers reported on this disappearance, naming the whole thing the missing children's incident.
I
Police
still
would even
love the fact,
charge
even that
William
with
with
all of this nonsense, they still tried having some level of comedic, like, satire to the way the game was played. Because you remember, obviously, it's like, yeah, we can't afford another lawsuit. Please don't, please don't kill the kids in the front room. If their kid's gonna die, please keep it out of sight, out of mind. We can't afford another lawsuit.
the crimes after finding security footage of the golden mascot suit luring kid convict him. They had no bodies, and his face had been hidden behind the mascot suit the
This video's
entire
gonna be
time.
really hard
What
to
they
edit.
had was circumstantial at best. And so he walked away.
Oh, I hate it when that kind of thing happens. Dude, I literally have a phobia of, like, seeing things at the end of a corridor and then it dipping out of sight. Oh, that's
behind the
actually,
mascot suit the entire time. What
creeps
they
me the
had
fuck
was
out.
circumstantial
Like,
at
I
best.
literally, I
So
sit
he
at home
walked
sometimes
away
and
a
watch, like,
free
ghost
man.
videos,
But Henry
and I don't
knew
believe
the
in
truth.
ghosts.
In these
But then I'll
murders,
look
he saw his
behind
daughter
me,
Charlie
fearing that
all
there's
over
something
again.
peering
so
around
he
the
threw
corner
Afton
from my
out of the
door.
company and shuttered the doors to the old pizzeria. Henry would keep the franchise quiet for 2 years. This would not happen again. This could not happen again. How could he protect the kids? Finally, he developed a
Oh
solution.
boy,
He
Toy
would implement
Chica.
an even more
Everybody's
extreme
favorite.
security system in the form of new animatronics. Toy animatronics, inspired by the toys that
This is where the Rule 34 really kicked off.
they've
Oh
been
god.
selling years ago. But these guys, these were special. They were a new breed of robot with facial recognition abilities.
But most importantly, they're all tied into
Hello,
some kind of
hello.
criminal database, so they can detect a predator a mile away.
All the original animatronics
You know they used the term predator very poignantly there. Like, that was a very intentional use of the word. Because obviously they're trying to say, you know, a child predator, but they don't. That's then pushing the idea of, well, there are other things that are predators.
now withered with
There are
age
other things
were
that go
moved
bump
to
in the
new
night.
location. With a
Mhm.
plan in place, it was time
Cheers,
to
lad.
try once more. The
Hi,
year
lad.
was 1987, and the new and improved
It's time!
Fazbear's
It's the
Pizza
point of
was making
87!
headlines in local newspapers. Headlines that just so happened to catch
I
the
think
attention
there's like
of
I think there's a thing here that people kind of overlook. The level of technology for the time is obviously disassociative. Like that, those
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of, like you can't even get this kind of technology now. But I think that's kind of the point. Is to really implore that element of fantastical otherworldliness.
William Afton. Freddy's was back, and without him, that was his idea, his character. Henry was, yet again, trying to cut him out of the picture. No, as long as these restaurants stayed open, William would always come back. Then he noticed the phone number to apply at the bottom of the article.
Dude, you've already killed a bunch of kids. Just kill Afton.
Afton would go back, not as an owner or
kill the other guy.
co-founder. He would go back in the one place that they would least suspect him, a lowly day shift security guard. And there it was, buried in the back of parts and services, mixed in with the old withered animatronics, was the golden rabbit. With the yellow security badge still on his chest, he used his crank to pull open the spring locks. It was time for Bonnie to give an encore performance.
That's how Springtrap was made.
Spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out. Especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. A position just became available.
1987, five more kids.
Oh my god, all the things are connecting in my head. Like, I'm thinking back to when I played these games and heard this dialogue, it made no sense, but now that just, oh my god! Dude, the amount of Five Nights at Freddy's music videos I listened to, you would have thought I would have, like, just understood this by osmosis from the lyrics.
He didn't know what felt better, getting back into the suit after 2 long years of waiting, or knowing how devastating this would be to Henry the next morning. He didn't even try to hide his crime this time, just meant more blood on Henry's hands. He'd failed to protect the kids again. The restaurant had only been open for a few weeks, but William was sure that this would get it to close. Good, if he couldn't have Freddy's, no one would. Whenever a new pizzeria opened, he would be there. But as he sat in his bunker, something else started to linger in William's mind. He had seen something
in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie they used Living Tombstones music.
They had been wandering around the building, spurred on by the puppet. It was almost like those old robots were trying to save the kids. Save them? What? They couldn't, obviously, but still, how were they moving? It was almost like they had been given life somehow. Did he have something to do with that? The following day, the news would report a security guard getting bitten by one of the animatronics during the day shift. Was that bite meant for him? William's curiosity was stronger now than his bloodlust. He had to learn more, but how? There was no way he'd ever be able to get inside another Freddy's pizzeria. Heck, there was practically no way a Freddy's would ever open again. He needed to create something new, something brand new. He needed to create his own pizzeria.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate
so that's sister
Freddy
location.
Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
Circus Baby's Pizza World. This would be the place where he could continue his work. No longer just murdering, experiment.
Welcome to the
He needed more kids, and he needed them alive. And knowing that he couldn't show his face on the restaurant floor, he needed a way of remotely capturing his victims and preserving them for his work. With that goal in mind, he
this just
designed
gets more and
a
more
new breed of
horrific as time goes
animatronic.
by.
Their endoskeletons fluid and flexible. He equipped them with sound lures that could mimic voices. They could isolate children. They could incapacitate and contain them with zero direct input from him. It was brilliant. He was brilliant.
Horrifying.
Far beyond the simple bars and wires of Henry's designs. And the character.
And you know what's worse? With these old animatronics, I wasn't as afraid of them, but I have a horrendous phobia of like mannequins and everything. So the endoskeletons are more horrifying than the actual animatronic exoskeleton.
Oh,
But
100%.
The animatronics from Sister Location were so like plasticky and mannequin looking. This was the worst one out of all of them. I had the worst time playing Sister Location. It even to this day, it creeps me the fuck out. Especially Bedora, whatever her name was, the ballerina.
Characters he chose for this were uniquely his. His new roster wasn't going to be tainted by Henry's disgusting barnyard bird. Instead, it was back to his characters, his creations, Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, as well as 2 special ones. The first, Ballora, was an homage to the woman who left him. Now she would never leave him again. The second, the titular baby.
How many times do you think Purple Guy decided to create a special orifice for this one? You're all thinking it. I'm just the one with the intrusive thoughts to say it.
Now she would never leave him again. The second, the titular baby, was designed with his baby in mind, Elizabeth, his youngest child.
This one was
she
the
would
worst
always
for the
be
sake of being
Daddy's little
scary.
girl, the one that listened to him, the one that obeyed until the day that she didn't.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her? She's so pretty and shiny. Didn't you make
the
her
kid's
just
voice.
for me?
The day before Circus Baby's Pizza World opened, she disobeyed. She didn't listen. Left alone with Baby, she got too close. The animatronic ripped in half and swallowed her whole. A scared and confused child fading into eternal darkness. By the time Afton found
Vor?
Stop.
I'm sorry, intrusive thoughts. Oh god, that's horrifying. Are you kidding me?
She got too close. The animatronic ripped in half and swallowed her whole. A scared.
Why do I feel like I should have known that? Like, I knew that, I remember distinctively that Baby was very unique, but what the fuck? That's grim.
A confused child fading into eternal darkness. By the time Afton found her, it was too late. She was gone. He immediately canceled the launch of Circus Babies under the guise of a gas leak. But wait, as he sat there at the foot of the stage, he noticed that something was different. The eye color of the robot had changed. Baby had been built with blue eyes, but now they were emerald green, the same color as Elizabeth's. Was she in there? Could this all be connected to the free-moving animatronics that he had seen at Freddy's? He had to know more. His morning turned to excitement.
Dude, your animatronics just killed someone.
Started. 1993. Jesus. Pathetic. This place was pathetic. Henry had clearly tried to reopen one final time with those old original animatronics from so long ago, but William's damage to the brand had been permanent. These things stank of death. They hadn't been washed in decades. But even if they had, nothing could wash away the stink of murder that haunted these halls. One night, then another, then another. William repeatedly snuck into the old broken restaurant to lure the living animatronics to him, one by one dismantling them, robbing them of their endoskeletons. The metal had to be the secret. It had to contain the remnants of life itself.
Oh, that's
but
so weird to look at.
Leaping out of a room that was invisible to the animatronics programming, he dragged the oversized robotic skeletons back to his underground workshop, back to where Circus Baby watched on with glowing, curious eyes.
See, this is kind of where I'm wondering, when did Scott Cawthon like make this like overlap? Because obviously, when he made Five Nights at Freddy's 1, he wouldn't have had consideration of like Baby. I don't think he had that much floor planning. So I'm kind of wondering, he made it work to kind of tie it all together, but I mean, the level of ingenuity he would have had in a creative space to have made this work. Oh, gosh.
Somehow felt alive. Not knowing what else to do, William melted the robotic parts down. 5 animatronic endoskeletons reduced down to one silvery puddle of goo. Could he transfer this living metal to his own creations? He had to try. He picked up a syringe and filled it with the molten metal and injected the goo into Funtime Freddy's twisted, wiry endoskeleton. And suddenly, the coils came to life. Like snakes writhing in a pile, what had once been cold, lifeless metal moved and jolted on its own. He'd done it! He had unlocked
this is some, like, Disney level
life itself, except
fantasy.
Something was clearly wrong.
The
movements were
of the dead,
they were violent,
into
angry.
metal.
Baby didn't act this way. She had been calm, collected. This was clearly something else, something mindless and frantic. Perhaps by mixing the souls and then portioning them out, he had created incomplete beasts. He would need to keep testing to truly understand it. He needed more of this remnant.
Dude, at what point do you just sit there and go, you know what, this is a monumental discovery of science and spirituality. At what point do I take my discoveries to the press?
5 lined up and blocked the door, and Afton's mind reeled. The scientific implications of this were incredible. Ghosts, real ghosts.
See?
You could see
this is what I mean.
Standing
You're gonna
against
think that I pre-watched this now.
What could they do? What couldn't they do? He panicked as Cassidy approached. How do you stop something that's already dead? Maybe with the thing that resulted in their death in the first place.
Make
he
it
would
play
get
World
into
of
his suit
Warcraft.
like old times. He would regain his power over them just like the day that they died. He was the genius. He was the one in the suit. He was the one in charge. The spring lock snapped into place. Maybe it was his frantic movements. Maybe it was the leaky abandoned restaurant. Maybe it was just fate coming to collect its due. He didn't know.
Oops.
The only thing he did know was that his brain was
And
suddenly
thus,
filled with
Springtrap was
searing
born.
white-hot pain as hundreds of metallic pins and gears stabbed into his body from all sides. All he could do was collapse. Blood slowly
I will
oozing
say,
out of the
I
suit
will
and
say,
pooling onto the floor around him. It couldn't
Springtrap,
end like this. It
thematically, is my
wouldn't
favorite
end like
animatronic.
this. His work was unfinished.
Just because of the
Unable to move,
grimness
his
of
only
it.
option was
I
to
love,
survive,
Oh, yeah.
to
I
live,
love gritty
keep
artwork, and
living.
I've drawn
Took days
Springtrap
lying
a
in his
few
own
times.
blood, but eventually someone found him. A security guard making a normal report. When he saw the animatronics torn apart in the middle of the party room floor, it caused him to file an immediate report of a break-in. An owner would have to come in and claim the damage. And who else would it be other than Henry? Hope jumped in Afton's heart. Henry would see him. They were partners after all. He would be the one to help save him, to get him out of this suit, to relieve him from this tremendous pain. Henry entered the secret room. His eyes fell on Afton sitting there in the pool of red, and Henry, saying nothing, turned and walked away.
This is just to inform all employees that due to budget restrictions, the previously mentioned safe rooms are being sealed at most locations, including this one. Nothing is being taken out beforehand, so if you left anything inside, then it's your own fault. Management also requests that
sounds like working at McDonald's.
Family, friends, or
if you'd left your personal belongings in the
Afton
safe
would sit
in
hanging
your
on for 30 years,
lockers,
trapped behind the walls with an iron will that refused to die. End of this part. I say this part because it's not officially the end of the Afton era just yet, but this just felt like a really solid stopping point, and the episode has gone on forever. Okay, so most of this is things that we already knew, stuff that's been established and reestablished time and time again by the games. That said, there are two things that I absolutely have to address. The first and biggest is the placement of sister location, or more specifically, Elizabeth's death. To me, evidence in game seems to suggest that it was meant to come before the crying child's death in 1983.
So I think this is what I mean where it's a bit confusing, because there's some parts of this story that just don't make sense with like the plot holes and everything. This is one of them. Like there's the canonically in the timeline, some of these things just don't seem to be where they should, which is why these theories are just theories, and Scott Cawthon either is doing it on purpose and has a greater good, greater plan kind of thing going on, and maybe he knows something we don't, but this is where it just doesn't really make sense.
The crying child saw something. Remember what you saw is the phrase that's repeated over and over again by psychic friend Fredbear, aka William Afton speaking through a walkie-talkie in the Fredbear plushie's stomach. But what did he see? Well, I think we can tell based on how the nightmare animatronics are visualized. They have mouths in their stomachs, just like Baby ripping in half at the waist to swallow a kid. There's also the empty girl's room.
That is not a line you would ever want to hear in anything other than a horror movie.
Yeah, by a dead sister. And lastly, it explains why he's scared, and more specifically, why Afton wants him scared. He needs his kids to stay away from the animatronics. He doesn't want them getting too close, because the last time one of his kids got too close to a robot, his daughter died. That's then why he sets up the nightmares, to scare both Mike and the crying child away from the animatronics from that point forward. That's why books like the Character Encyclopedia outright suggest that we play as the crying child in FNAF 4. That's why he has a nanny cam following the crying child everywhere, so he can keep tabs on his kids when they're out of his sight. He can't let another Elizabeth situation happen. The death of Elizabeth also gives...
Are we gonna not acknowledge the fact that the entire reason the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise exists is because somebody was a bad parent and spent too long working rather than actually parenting?
100%.
William Afton extra motivation for killing. He's a grieving father. His daughter was taken away from him, so Charlie should die as well. He's lashing out at the world after losing his kids. And again, we know that at least one of his children had to have died prior to Charlie's death, based on the mound of dirt that we see in Midnight Motorist. It also allows Circus babies to open and close earlier in the timeline, which is how you wind up with Funtime Foxy appearing as Mangle in the FNAF 2 location. Basically, Elizabeth dying first has everything
I remember this came out as well. There was like a whole big mega theory about Mangle and who the second endoskeleton was. Oh, you absolutely know there's some Stephen King inspiration in here. 100%. This is definitely a Stephen King-esque storyline. I think even Scott Cawthon was in an interview where he said a lot of his inspirations was Stephen King, not Geiger, but there was a lot of like those 90s sort of the sort of like horror writers that were big in the 80s and 90s. Those were the big inspirations, which is probably why he bases this in the 80s and 90s.
2 location. Basically, John Elizabeth dying first has everything it needs to fit.
If you go and look up, if you ever want to see this, go and look up Scott Cawthon interview. It's a bit of a long video. I can't remember who exactly it's by, but it's about an hour and a bit worth of an interview. And he does say during the interview at several points what his big inspirations were. Stephen King was definitely one of them.
Important thing, the murder weapon. Why would Afton be building an animatronic with a giant claw in its stomach so early in the timeline? At this point, he just has no motive. It just doesn't make sense prior to 1983.
Which is why
this is a theory! And we know for a fact that the missing children's incident is 1985. So Elizabeth's death coming before any of those events just doesn't work. Hence why I placed it where I did in the narrative timeline. Afton's death here is also a bit tricky. We know that he returned to the FNAF 1 location to break down the original animatronic in order to harvest their remnant. We know that he melts down 5 things to become one thing. Candy Cadet makes that very clear. So the 5 things are the 5 endo...
What is it? I don't remember this one. The hell is this from? I've played most FNAF games, I remember. Was that the weird diner one?
Yes. I remember Verendel played it. Yeah, it was. It was custom night.
Oh,
the
that
pizzeria
would be
simulator.
I never actually finished that one. And because I didn't finish one of the FNAF games, I am now unbased and unable to comment on anything. And everything I've said so far should now be thrown out the window because I am unfactually educated in this game.
Here. So the 5 things are the 5 endoskeletons from the various animatronics. That would be totally fine if it weren't for one huge problem. On his 5th visit to the pizzeria, Afton gets spring-locked. So either the 5 becoming 1 starts in 1993, but then finishes 30 years later when he reemerges from the wall to add the last endoskeleton to his pile, or he's had himself some...
I still remember playing this one for the first time, and I was like, yo, he's looking kind of juicy. And then you realize, yep, that's actually a dude underneath there.
To the original location after harvesting all the stuff that he can. It's not ideal, but it's the one angle that makes the most sense. And with that, this next chapter comes to a close, thereby leaving us with 5 more games to cover and another 40+ years.
So I guess if you guys want to see us watch the next part to the video, leave a comment down below. Let me know that you enjoyed it. Tia, how much is your brain opened from watching this?
It was meant to be opened?
But that's just a theory. One that I can't substantiate anymore because I'm unbased. Ha!